Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I'm your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. So, here's our overview for the day. Venezuelan gangs, a question mark. Comrade Kamala, Kami Kamala, question mark. And code switching. So, before we get into that, here's some quick hits. J.K. Rowling is back in the news cycle. Why, you might ask? Why can we never get rid of this woman? She is currently picking on a partially blind transgender Paralympic runner. That's right, partially blind transgender Paralympic runner. That's who she's currently picking on. And at this point, she's got to be like looking for trans. She's got to be like, her Google search history has got to be like, transgender woman athlete, transgender woman Paralympics, transgender woman. Like, I don't want to know what her porn search history is, because at this rate, this obsession is beyond weird. It's beyond obsessive. Like, I want to be clear about something. This partially blind transgender runner didn't even make the finals in her 200 or 400 meters run. Like, she didn't make it. She didn't make it past it's like J.K. Rowling is self-owning. And at this point, I'm like, you are the only one who's interested in like policing women's bodies to this extent, like all in the name of safety. She's actually starting to sound like the most misogynist of men in terms of how far she's gone to police people's bodies. At this point, J.K. Rowling wouldn't pass her own test. Because, like, bitch, you are built like a porch. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just all like wood and hard angles. Like, I really need you to get it together. I'm not here for any like judgments. I think bodies are bodies. They're all just wobbly bits that we're out here trying to keep control of, a little tuck here, a little nip, whatever, bodies are bodies. Very embarrassing, because being alive is embarrassing. But somehow J.K. Rowling just is so obsessed with trans people, trans women in particular. And like, I can't even wrap my head around what she does with her days. I'm like, you have too much money and too little time. Why don't you go write some mid-series? Although I'm not going to lie, it slapped at the time. It's garbage now. Anyway, what about the ceasefire? Where are we with that? Is Netanyahu moving? I found out precisely what he's using to justify delaying the ceasefire talks. As people continue to protest in Israel and around here, United States, around the world, as the UK says, we're going to pull back some of these arms, to which Netanyahu says, you should be ashamed of yourself. Hilarious coming from that guy. Can you imagine Netanyahu and J.K. Rowling in a room? Just the most awful. That would be the most awful hangout in the world. Anyway, his excuse, he's talking about, and he's literally fighting against his own cabinet for a narrow strip of scrubland, right? Just scrubland and sand dunes on the Gaza side of the border with Egypt, right? And he's using this as a major obstacle. He's saying that he wants to maintain control over this, what's called the Philadelphia corridor, to prevent Hamas from replenishing its arsenal through its network of tunnels, etc. And he's saying that it's necessary to ensure the group can never again launch an attack on Israel like the one on October 7th, right? The problem is his own defense minister, which we know he's been having mad back and forth with. They are not in agreement on this. The defense minister is saying that they should relinquish the corridor, at least temporarily, in order to secure an agreement to bring back around 100 hostages still held in Gaza, right? And about a third of whom are believed to be dead. I want to be clear. Why are hostages dying in Gaza? Because Israel continues to bomb Gaza. That is the only reason why. I mean, I don't want to say it's explicitly the only reason why. There's a myriad factors, but I do know the majority have died because they are being bombed by Israel. So Netanyahu is fully aware that these hostages are held in Gaza and continues to bomb it, just point blank period, without any consideration or care for who's there. Because it's not about Israelis at this point, and it's not about Palestinians, and never has been. He is 100%. The only thing that Netanyahu cares about is ensuring his own political survival at this point. And we can extend it here. He is very much invested in defeating Harris, and he very much wants to get Trump elected. These are the only things that he cares about. He doesn't give a damn about anything else. Today, at least 35 people in Palestine have been bombed right? And why in a safe zone, many of whom were children. So Israel bombed a site where children were receiving polio vaccines. This is the devil incarnate. Like, that's the work of the devil incarnate. And I'm not even like a evil guy. I'm not like a guy who's like, there's good and then there's evil, there's choices. But I'm like, no, there's actually evil. Genocide is one of those things. And knowingly seeing it through is just absolute evil in the most naked form that I could possibly imagine. So what's Biden doing, right? He's still the guy in charge. He's still a head guy. What's he doing? He's wagging his finger, and you don't know if he's actually doing it to scold it or because he can't keep his hand still. But I do know that he's talking left out of his mouth, but governing right. And the thing that's so ironic to me is it's the greatest country in the world, so-called greatest country in the world, and Netanyahu is making a fool out of Biden. He's making a fool out of the Biden administration, and he's keen on making a fool out of Kamala Harris if she does not, and she will be made a fool of if she does not change her tune and actually step away from the Biden administration's stance on just blanket supporting Israel. I do want to say there's one thing, though, because I think, and maybe I'll make it its own episode, because I heard a lot of people say, oh, the Democrats and this. I think I learned this. I don't know if everybody knows this. That the DNC, when we talk about establishment Democrats, like that is the DNC, but there's actually hundreds and thousands of Democratic parties, right? The DNCC and the this and the that and the other, and I didn't know that. And the vast majority of them who are Democrat are pro-Palestine. Anyway, so when people say, I can't support the Democrats and I fully understand, but do we know what we're actually talking about? Anyway, that's an episode for later. Are there Venezuelan gangs in Colorado? There was a video that came out. I watched it, right? So Aurora has been in the national spotlight due to its like weird reports of a Venezuelan gang. They're called Tren de Aragua, or TDA, and they said they're taking over an apartment building after a video showed a group of armed men inside an apartment complex, and this video went viral. So, I had to do my digging, because this just sounds like a lot of racist pandering to red-pilled losers, but I thought, there's a lot going on. Let me verify these facts. It turns out it's just fake. It's absolutely fucking fake news. It's straight up fake news, just straight up racist propaganda. Aurora Police Chief Heather Morris said in a police-provided interview that officers found no evidence of a gang takeover. Not only were they there, but there was so much hysteria that the police were filmed themselves shaking hands. It turns out those body cameras do work when they want them to, shaking hands and kissing babies to say, look, there's nothing here. I mean, we're still going to take this very seriously, but we don't see it yet. So the mayor of Aurora, Kaufman, said that the apartments that were seeing gang activity were all under the same ownership that had multiple code violations or criminal activity preceding the migrant crisis. So at least he's suggesting that there was already criminal activity happening. Again, I'm not keen on any of this language, but what's fascinating to me is a story came out exactly like this one following this whole Aurora debacle in Chicago, also fake. And they said the same thing. It's a Venezuelan gang. So this is obviously bots, red-pilled losers, Musk, all of them pushing this propaganda campaign to get us to foster more hate towards immigrants and towards migrants. And Venezuela is ideal because there has been so much displacement and so many Venezuelans are seeking a refugee status at this moment, many of whom are at the border because of how America has impacted foreign policy or has enforced its foreign policy across South America, and Venezuela has been deeply impacted. We know that they're currently in this huge fight for control over power because an election has been stolen there. See our previous episodes to get more on that if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But anyway, activists in Denver, right, looked at this national attention and said, this could really harm immigrants who are not associated with the gang. And again, how big the gang is in that region is not confirmed. It's all nonsense. Nate Casa, a community organizer for the East Colfax Community Collective, said that the headlines were making life more challenging for the vast majority of immigrants who recently came to Colorado and have nothing to do with TDA. He says, this screams racist to me. It screams to me that it's capitalizing on a political opportunity to push hate against immigrants. Yes. So it's fake in Colorado, it's fake in Chicago, and it's honestly just racist propaganda. So I'm there sleuthing the news as I do, and I come across a clip from the latest press conference, right? So the video was a clip of Peter Doocy, dumb Doocy. Peter Doocy, a senior White House correspondent for Fox News. So that's who he is. And he's asking KJP, right, the press secretary currently in the White House, since when does the VP have what sounds like a southern accent? And I was like, what is he talking about? What? So she fires back with, do you think that Americans care about that right now? So I had to go look at what he was talking about. And yeah, Kamala Harris, two speeches were, put side by side. Kamala Harris talking to black folks at one rally, Kamala Harris talking to primarily white folks in another. And it occurred to me in the hullabaloo, forget the racist nonsense for a second. I'm like, do white people not know what code switching is? Because it's like okay, you do it. It's not code switching in its literal term, but think about how you talk on an email. Nobody says per my last email, right? Like it's anybody who does anything with emails, when we're writing an email, we all turn into like a 36-year-old white woman named Claire. You know what I mean? Like in our tone, where it's like per my last name, it's slightly passive aggressive, but never crosses a line. That might be the closest thing that I can help you get with code switching, or like how you never tell your parents the truth about your life and you try to keep it real nice and light and tight, right? Assuming that you actually still talk to them because, man, did we grow up in a weird few generations. But anyway, my point is you have some idea with it, but code switching in particular has, when it comes to Black Americans, comes from a really kind of very cool history that started from a very ugly place, obviously. I mean, go check out Du Bois's, double consciousness theory or whatever but there's a lot of written work on this. But the point is, it started out because Black people were constantly under this gaze of whiteness and had to perform in a particular way so as to be, more normalized to white people. Because remember, bias doesn't just work one way. It's not, well, I hate Negroes or I hate Asians. Bias works, it's a two-way street. And I'm not talking about how Black people feel about white. No, I mean, it's a two-way street, as in it's not so much I hate these people as I want to give the person that reminds me of me something. I want to help this type of person. And so more often than not, when we think about things like nepotism, when we think about things like opportunities, it's not simply because, well, I just hate those types of people. It's like, well, I felt like I really wanted to help this person. I saw myself in this person. I wanted to look out for them. And for all the ways that survival comes to play in the life of a Black American all throughout history, right, there has been an expectation to kind of soften yourself, to become more relatable to white people so as not to stoke their fears or concerns, which were already stoked to begin with. But the thing that's really wonderful about the Black American tradition is that code switching became something really awesome. Like, it started to be this like celebration of language and culture and ethnicity that was just for Black Americans, that were just for Black folks. And it was a really beautiful thing. And if you study any kind of rhetoric, you know that what's been referred to at different points in times as, Ebonics, often in a derogatory way, or AAVE, but the vernacular of Black Americans is really complex and rich. And according to rhetoricians and historians, it's richer than the English language itself. I think that's pretty gangster. I haven't read those works yet, but it's out there. Anyway, the point is, I listened to the two speeches, and on one, Kamala Harris was saying, thank a union for this. And the other one, she's saying, you need to thank your unions. And that's because in the African-American tradition, that's what it's called in school terms, which is many of the books I read Anna Banks if you're interested in it. It talks about how in the Black American tradition, it is deeply invested in call and response, whereas in traditional white or Western beliefs, like Western thought processes, Western theories, I'll use Western is actually more accurate in this. Think about Aristotle, think about, the other guy, Socrates, whatever, it's very much lecture built. It's like lecture based. It's, one person speaking and everybody else like nodding, and it's very serious. Donald Trump actually is a great example of that. He just gets on stage and rambles endlessly, right? It doesn't really matter whether people are invested or not, but in the African American rhetorical tradition, it is call and response. So when Kamala is saying things like, if you enjoy the weekend, you need to thank a union, and there's pauses and people are calling out and cheering and responding back. That call and response, think about your very stereotypical Baptist church, can I get an amen? Amen. Like, it's very much invested in community engagement, and it really removes that idea of like this person at the pulpit is a gifted person or a special person. Actually, it's about raising people up. So that's partly why she does it. And then, in the other video, it's kind of funny where it's primarily white people. She's like, and you need to thank your unions for doing that. It's like, that's actually really funny. Anyway, that's neither here or there. I just thought you might not know what that means. They're really trying to find anything they can on Kamala Harris, which brings us to the actual crux of today. Kamala, the commie? Comrade Kamala? That's what Elon Musk and weirdos on the right would have you believe. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are really pushing this idea, and it's across the entire manosphere, that Kamala Harris is a communist. First of all, that's very funny. But then Elon Musk uses an AI-generated image of Kamala Harris that has her in like a full-on red uniform. She looks like Bison from Street Fighter. It's kind of ridiculous, but also kind of hot. So you think to yourself, here we are, we're criticizing establishment Democrats for, being extremely neoliberal, for falling back on, from pulling away completely from any leftist ideals. So we're living in that reality. And then to hear these like really ludicrous accusations that she's a communist, like I think some of us would be like, damn, I wish. Like, I don't want soup communism and gray communism. I might want the ones where things are a little bit more equal. But where is that coming from? Why are they using this? It's so absurd. Let me tell you first on what the F is going on in Tampa, because it has everything to do with this. So first of all, if there is a hell on earth, it might be Tampa. I just gotta say it. I'm sorry if you're from Tampa. I apologize so badly, but you know what I mean, right? Okay. So right now, 4 Americans. I mean, this is happening right now. It's a case that's likely going to be resolved in the next 4 weeks. But in Tampa, so in Florida, 4 Americans are facing charges that they conspired to have other U.S. citizens act as illegal agents of the Russian government, right? Or that they acted as unregistered Russian agents themselves. That's what they're being charged with. The prosecutors say that Russians directed them, and in some cases paid them, to push Russian propaganda, including after the country invaded Ukraine in 2022. So this court case is based between 2014 and 2022, right? Keep that information locked. What makes this case interesting beyond the premise? All 4 defendants are black. All black men. They're all black. And all 4 of them are current or former members of the African People's Socialist Party, an organization promoting black power as they see it. Remember, I would not cop for any of these works. I don't know them. I don't know who's in them. I don't care for them very much, but I do know where they come from, and I do know where they claim to have their ideals. These are many entities that honestly would be at odds with a movement like Black Lives Matter in its heyday, because it comes from a lot of old guard nonsense, but that's neither here nor there. I could talk about that. That's an episode in of itself. But the point is, it's the African People's Socialist Party, right? And 3 of the members were also part of the Uhuru movement, right? So that's the Socialist Party's activist arm, and that's based in St. Petersburg and St. Louis. So the Uhuru movement claims to support self-determination for black people and has protested issues from racism and colonialism to local police conduct for decades. And that is true. This is true. This harkens back to the 60s and 70s, right? Where that was the tradition of the Black Panther Party, right? And we know what happened with that. Anytime black folks start to rise up, and particularly around socialist ideals when it comes to things like food, when it comes to things like education and rights, even including the right to carry, well, COINTELPRO was the most sophisticated infiltration system America has ever seen. Literally, SWAT teams were created to eliminate an entire generation of black leadership. It's very scary when black folks get together. So, why does this matter? Right? Like, why does this matter? Let me tell you a little bit more about the case. So, again, this is between 2014 and 2022. Ionov is a Russian who worked with a Russian intelligence agency named FSB, engaged, right, with these four men and a few other unknown or unnamed co-conspirators for years, and urged them to make pro-Russian statements while he backed their unsuccessful campaigns for the St. Petersburg City Council in 2017 and 2019, right? So these guys are, whoever was there helping these guys out or trying to get them to push Russian propaganda, they're gone. They left the country. They're like, I'm out of here. I'm not sticking around. So we don't know what's going on with them, and they're likely never going to be charged. But this is what one of the men had to say. We're innocent of what they claim we've done. We're just a vehicle that's being used to assault free speech. So the reason why this matters is that there's a history behind this. And we need to be mindful of this, especially in this moment when Trump and Musk and every right-wing idiot is out there trying to say Kamala Harris is a communist. This is extremely racially charged. Extremely racially charged. So, to everyone out there, what's this supposed to be, your Wednesday episode? Yeah? Crack open the vodka and Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. Bring out the cabbage and collard greens, the borscht and black-eyed peas, the smothered pork chop, and the solyanka. We have some history to do right here, right now. So Russia has been playing on racial tensions in the U.S. and that predates the Cold War, but it wasn't always exploitative and it wasn't always a play. At one point in time, there was a global movement because America's contradictions were on full display. They were calling themselves the land of the free, while the world was watching black Americans get abused, bombed, annihilated, incarcerated at every fundamental level, while claiming to be the world's image, the perfect image of freedom, particularly around World War II, post-World War II, right? But let's go back to even as far back as 1932, right? There's this poster that I found. It's so gangster. But anyway, there's this guy, Dmitry Moore. He was the Soviet Union's most famous propaganda poster artist. So he was like their Emory Douglas from back in the day. He created a poster that said, "Freedom to the prisoners of Scottsboro." So if you don't know your Black American history that well, which is really, to be honest, American history, right? This is a reference to the Scottsboro boys. Then there are 9 black teenagers who were falsely accused of raping 2 white women in Alabama, right? So that happened. And then they were repeatedly wrongly convicted by all-white Southern juries. So the case became a symbol of the injustices of the Jim Crow South, right? And the young Soviet state, that's what it was at that time, took and tried to squeeze out all the propagandist value it could. It was part of a plan put in place in 1928 by the Comintern, the Communist International, right? That's what they were doing. They were trying to sow dissent and trying to push their beliefs and ideals, and they were very much already at odds with America. So their mission was to spread the communist revolution around the world. That's what it was. And this is a very different Russian landscape than it is now, right? They'd seen a revolution through, but yes, were the elites already reestablishing themselves in new ways? And was there a new world order established that maybe eliminated the feudal system as we knew it, but created something else? Yeah. But anyway, so the plan initially called, this plan that they came up with, the Comintern, it was initially very much invested in recruiting Southern blacks, right? That's what they called it. They called them the Southern blacks, and pushing for self-determination in the Black Belt. So let's go to the beginning of the Cold War, which coincided with the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement. The two became intertwined, right? Both in how the Soviets used racial strife and how the Cold War propelled the cause of civil rights forward. So these histories are very much linked. One of the works that I got this from is Cold War Civil Rights, by Dudziak. She's a legal historian at Emory, and her work is seminal to the topic. It's not the only book out there by any means, but it did help put some things together for me. And so there was recognition that the U.S. couldn't lead the world if it was seen as repressing people of color. That's her quote. So in September in 1957, right, the Arkansas governor, his name was ridiculous. I can't believe it's Orval Faubus. Okay. I'm telling you, white people used to have amazing names. Like just be like, wake up and call your kid Butch. Awesome. Very gay. Right? Julian. What happened to those good white names? Dick. That was a good name. This guy's name was Orval Faubus. So he deployed the National Guard in Arkansas in 1957 to keep 9 black students from integrating to the Central High School in Little Rock, right? So you know this story. You've heard of Little Rock before. So what happened in Russia? While this was going on, this communist newspaper, right? So Russia was at that point the USSR. They ran this sensational story with photographs about the conflict, and they used the headline, "Troops Advanced Against Children." Honestly, peak headline, couldn't have written it better myself, right? And we can see that happening again and again and again and again. But remember that newspapers were how people got information back in the day. There was no internet. It was all through journalists and newspapers, and these things would be spread. That's how information got around. That's how they spread it out. So they put this, and they said, noting at one point in that article, right, in the Little Rock crisis, that right now, behind the facade of the so-called American democracy, a tragedy is unfolding which cannot but arouse ire and indignation in the heart of every honest man. Honestly, pretty gangster. Couldn't have written it better myself. So the standoff was covered by newspapers around the world. Again, black students were not allowed to integrate, right? And so it noted, in every article around the world, it noted the discrepancy between the values that America claimed to have and said they wanted to spread around the world, but they weren't implementing those same values at home. So that global criticism ultimately worked in our favor. So post-World War II, the United States tried to convince all these countries to join it by taking up democracy and liberal values. So the U.S. government began to compete directly with the Soviets in parts of the world, because they had images. Out of America, you had white cops turning fire hoses and attack dogs on black protesters, and that pissed people off around the world. So they were like, oh, we better figure out what to do, especially because, and this is key to this moment in time, you're thinking about the Pan-African global struggle, right? A lot of African nations and countries were declaring independence from its white colonial rulers. So the 60s were a time of massive revolt, and we were approaching that. So thanks to that moment, right, it's a time that it's like one of these stories that are attached to the bigger story, at least if you're in America, which is, man, this was during the civil rights era, and this was that. But the global struggle was actually key to seeing through those civil rights wins, right? American presidents were not in the 50s and 60s. They might have sat down with MLK, but they weren't. That wasn't part of their main agenda. One of the reasons why those presidents met with those various civil rights leaders, and the reason why they pushed through those various civil rights victories had so much to do. Like I'm talking about the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act had so much to do with America being like, oh shit, the Soviets are literally beating us in terms of how they're spreading this propaganda. We really aren't living up to these values. We should do something. So to take this theme and to take away the momentum of the Soviets, right, they decided to implement those changes so that they couldn't be called hypocrites. Do you get what I'm saying? Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? Because at the time, Americans couldn't stop blaming the Russians for what was going on, but it forced America to, in part, look at itself, and we know that that's not something it's inclined to do. That's what global pressure could do at that point. So now we fast forward to now, you can look at this, obviously when you look at Russia, you know that the massive gap between the privileged elite and everybody else, right, showed that communist ideal of social equality was hardly more than an empty slogan, like many things across the left at this moment, not because they don't matter, the ideals aren't there, but because the power is not. This is the point. Pain is a very exploitative thing, and it can use identity, it can use history, it can use nations. And so there's two ways to look at this. Black folks, black liberationists have had a long history with socialist nations across the world when they were fighting for rights for black people and liberation for African nations and African peoples. And at the same time, oftentimes when we talked about how identity can be weaponized, black identity was weaponized against America. And so there are times where it works to the benefit of black folks and worked to it, but it was more like collateral than the intention. Because black people, like Native people, like any identity, honestly, when it comes to, oh, is this useful? Is this useful in this moment to see through this status quo agenda? You know, it's when you don't know how you're being used, it can really mess you up. So think of 2016, right? And I promise you I'll wrap it here because I know I'd be yapping. But this is actually, am I the only nerd in the room? Like, you know, to all of you listening, are you also obsessed with this? Or is this just me? Like, I love this shit. Because, like, if you go back to 2016, and if you think about it, we've never really recovered from that. You can blame Donald Trump for that, sure. I don't, like, but, you know, you also know that Black Lives Matter had a massive break in that moment for lots of different reasons as well. But we were played against each other, and we've never fully recovered from that. And a big reason for why that happened, it's not the only reason. My God, we know racism exists and has existed in America since it manifested itself on top of many, many nations that already existed here for thousands of years, right? These indigenous nations. We've never recovered because we are constantly being used against each other. Right? It's the axe cutting down the tree so that we're never looking up at the status quo. So if you go back to 2016, and I think I may have told you that I got weird ads at that time that were very much geared towards training me to hate white people. Really, really deeply invested in making me hate white people. The ads, if I didn't know to do my due diligence, right, and search those stories, did a lynching literally just happen in Mississippi a day ago? Is that a real story? But because of my identity markers on Facebook, I was seen as somebody who could be easily targeted to hate white people, right? So unfortunately for them, you guys already got under my skin. Huh? Pun intended. Pun intended. I loved too many white folks at that time. Sorry, you guys. But anyway, if you look at the actual data that came out of that time, Petersburg-based, there's a St. Petersburg-based propaganda group that it's almost called colloquially a troll factory, right? The Internet Research Agency. They used social media and Google, and they put out stupid propaganda, and the whole point of that was to deepen political and racial tensions in the United States. So in an interview on their own network, so this is on Russian TV, on the network TV Rain, right? They told the world that they used their tweets and they were directed to focus their commentary on socially divisive issues like race and guns, right? So some of these ads were targeted in Ferguson and Baltimore, which were rocked by protests after police killings at that time, right, for unarmed black men. Or another would show a black woman firing a rifle. It didn't matter if it was real or not. Other ads played on fears of illegal immigrants and Muslims. And of course, there are many ads designed around Black Lives Matter. So there's a rich history there. So but we are being played, is my point. We're being played. So when you hear Elon Musk and when you see Donald Trump talk about Kamala the commie, it is a way of calling her un-American. It's a way of exploiting her non-whiteness, right, to try to use it against her because they can't find anything on her. So they're trying anything and everything. They're throwing paint at the wall. I mean, God, socialism does exist in America. For the record, it exists for the rich. And to be clear, labor rights, civil rights, voting rights, education, those are the things that we actually fought for that are being eroded as we speak, because those were the things that brought us together. Every effort is made at keeping us apart. Every effort is made at keeping us apart. I simply refuse to play that fucking game. So what about these 4 men? What's going to happen to them? The maximum penalty that they could face is 10 years in prison for failing to register as a foreign agent. I'm like, you can register as a foreign agent? Like, where would you do that? What would you say? You'd be like, hello, I am here. I am a black, and I love Russia, and I'm here to disrupt American politics at every turn, and I'm getting paid to do so. Like, where's the office for that? What are they talking about? So anyway, could be facing up 10 years and 5 years for the charge of conspiring to have others act as Russian agents. I'll just tell you this. I'm paying attention. I'm going to be looking at how this plays out. But these men were preyed upon, 100%. They were preyed upon. They wanted justice, some kind of justice, some more equality, some kind of equality for black people in America. And their desire for that, right? The pain that they experience and feel around that made them highly exploitable to Russians who don't give a damn about black people or black justice, but wanted to use their identity as a weapon to stab at American quote unquote democracy, right? So did it seem like I was wearing a tin hat? I can take it off now. Have I been wearing it? But you get what I'm saying? Like, everything we're seeing is for a reason, but I think we got hit with a lot today, so I'm going to just reel it back in. I'm going to reel it back, you guys. Got a lot up there about Russia and Pan-African global solidarity and how Kamala Harris's identity is being used against her. But I promise you, how they're using it has everything to do with the fact that that she's black, and they are going to attack her for being black in every way, and they're trying to do this whole subliminal messaging thing, which is odd considering Trump and Putin seem to be best fucking buddies. This stuff is weird. Anyway, that's my long diatribe. It is an important context. Like this is going to play out more and more and more as more racial hatred is stoked, and I'm telling y'all, well, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work on us. With that, why don't we hit the VMs for that question of the day?
Hi, my name is Alexa Seituno. I'm a student, and I just want to see if you guys could give me an advice. It's hard for me to kind of stay focused in class or like doing my work, and I really want to get my high school diploma. Do you guys have any advice?
Oof, I feel this. You know, for somebody that yaps so much and for somebody that likes to read and study and research a lot of things, I wasn't a great student. I wasn't interested in a lot of what I was being taught. So, you know, you got to find the things that work for you. But here's some things that worked for me. Just that whole, 30 minutes or the 20 minutes, the 20-10 kind of practice where you're doing something for 20 minutes straight and you have a timer on and then you get 10 minutes to just fuck off and do whatever you want. It actually works. I could fit in an entire episode of Adventure Time, and I felt like I was taken somewhere else. So I could go for a walk or I could play with my dog. So that worked for me, especially when because high school is annoying because so much of it is not geared towards our personal interests or inclinations or even the things we need to know. Like, how about you teach civics and taxes, hoes? But anyway, the other thing that works for me is attaching whatever I could to things of interest. And I know this might be tough, but I do know you're a teacher, one of them at least. So you could, making it as personal to you as possible, making it meaningful to you as possible is a way to really shift it so you're not always doing boring work. Like if you got to do something on geography, for example, or you got to do something on history, choose something that touches upon your life or your family's life. It makes it far more interesting. And the other thing is, get it done, get it done, take what you need out of it, but find the things that really move you. That's the only way. Some things are to be endured, but some things are to be enjoyed. And the hard part is finding out what those things are for ourselves. The other thing that really helped me is gum. I have oral fixation. All the gays right now are like, tee! But I do, and licorice root, everybody knows I've always got a stick in my mouth. Yeah, licorice root explicitly. Okay? Anyway, those are some things that help me, but good luck to you. I feel like when you're asking questions, you're already halfway there. You're not emotionally shut down. You're not running away from it, and I think that's really brave and courageous, and I'm really proud of you for that. Thank you for that question, and I hope that this was helpful. And if your teacher hits me up, I'll definitely send you some cool stuff that helped me get through some of the worst parts of high school and university, to be honest. Terrible student. I was so bad. Anyway, got good grades but hated it. Ugh. Anyway, with that, time to end for the day. So, want to say to you all, thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. This show really is a labor of love. New episodes drop 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are streaming. I want to hear from you. Please drop us or email us a voice note question at jfktodayShow@gmail.com. Shout out to KR, Carolyn. Shout out to you, the listeners that make it all possible. Mad love. Peace.